At 35,000 feet above the frozen Rockies, civilian Flight 422 had become a ghost ship. Both pilots were completely unconscious. The flight computer was deteriorating, and the Boeing 737 was wandering blindly toward a wall of jagged granite. Everyone aboard had only one hope: a passenger sleeping soundly in seat 7C, and a frantic military radio transmission ordering someone to wake her. Captain Marin Whitaker was lost in the kind of exhaustion that settles into the bones, a fatigue only a fighter pilot can truly understand. For the past 6 months, she had spent her days strapped into the cockpit of an F-35A Lightning II, deployed from Al Dhafra Air Base, and flying punishing combat air patrols that pushed human endurance to its absolute limit. The force of pulling 9 Gs punished the spine, but the constant state of mental hypervigilance was what truly hollowed a person out. Now that she was safely back in the United States, all she wanted was to go home to Seattle. Tonight, she was traveling as an ordinary civilian in aisle seat 7C aboard Trans World Airlines Flight 422, a Boeing 737-800 charter, operating a late-night red-eye from Denver to Seattle. She wore civilian clothes, a faded gray hoodie pulled over her head, worn jeans, and heavy black boots. Bose noise-canceling headphones covered her ears, muting the steady hum of the 2 CFM56 turbofan engines. She had no interest in the complimentary drink service or the in-flight movie. Before the aircraft had even pushed back from the gate, Marin closed her eyes and surrendered to the deep, dreamless sleep of a soldier finally off duty. At the front of the plane, beyond a fortified, bullet-resistant Kevlar door, the flight deck glowed with dim lights and illuminated glass displays. Captain Conrad Ellison, a 20-year veteran of commercial aviation, sipped lukewarm black coffee. In the right seat, First Officer Julian Mercer made a small adjustment to the flight management computer. The autopilot was engaged in LNAV and VNAV modes, following a GPS-guided highway through the sky above the remote, snow-covered peaks along the Idaho-Washington border. Behind them, the cabin was dark, silent, and filled with sleeping passengers. Then a microscopic failure began. It originated in the outflow valve, a small mechanical flap at the rear of the aircraft that regulates cabin pressure. A corroded actuator, overlooked during a routine maintenance inspection, suddenly seized. Slowly and almost imperceptibly, the valve inched open, allowing the pressurized air inside the fuselage to escape into the thin, freezing atmosphere at 35,000 feet. An explosive decompression announces itself with unmistakable violence. The temperature plunges, a deafening bang tears through the cabin, and the oxygen masks fall at once. This, however, was a slow decompression, the most deceptive and lethal kind of failure an aircraft can experience. It stole oxygen in complete silence. On the overhead panel, the cabin altitude warning light began to flicker. A sharp ding-ding from the master caution system sounded inside the cockpit. Conrad blinked as he stared at the glowing amber light. Hypoxia, oxygen starvation, does not feel like suffocation. It feels like being wrapped in a warm, heavy blanket of intoxication. It brings confusion, euphoria, and an overpowering urge to sleep. "Julian," Conrad said, his words already beginning to slur as his hand drifted sluggishly toward the pressurization panel. "We've got a light." Julian frowned at the display. His oxygen-deprived brain could no longer understand the warning in front of him. It's Probably just a sensor glitch, Con. Let me reset it. He reached for the switch, but his hand missed it by 2 inches. A quiet, drunken laugh escaped him. Missed it. Put your mask on, Conrad whispered. But there was no urgency left in the command. He made no attempt to reach for his own quick-donning oxygen mask, stored only inches to his left. The brain needs oxygen to recognize that it is being deprived of oxygen. Within 60 seconds, Julian's head dropped forward against the control yoke. Conrad leaned back, his eyelids fluttering shut, as though he were settling down for a comfortable nap. The cockpit became deathly still, disturbed only by the steady, automated hum of the avionics cooling fans. Flight 422 was now a 150,000-pound missile traveling at 500 miles per hour, guided by a computer and crewed by ghosts far below. Inside the dark, cavernous operations room of the Seattle Air Route Traffic Control Center, veteran controller Grant Holloway watched the high-altitude sector. His eyes moved across the green radar targets sliding over his screen. Transwest 422, Seattle Center. Contact Spokane approach on 133.45, Grant said into his headset. Silence. Transwest 422, Seattle Center, radio check. Nothing. Grant frowned and enlarged the data block attached to the aircraft's target. Altitude, FL 350, 35,000 feet. Airspeed, 440 knots. Then he saw something terrifying. The altitude readout changed from FL 348 to FL 6. The plane was descending, with no conscious crew monitoring the systems. Another failure had begun to cascade. Ice had affected the aircraft's pitot-static system, and the unconscious pilots had never activated the heaters. The resulting malfunction disconnected the VNAV autopilot mode. The 737 was now slipping into a shallow, uncommanded descent at 1,000 feet per minute, directly toward the jagged teeth of the Cascade Mountains. Transwest 422. If you can hear this transmission, squawk ident, Grant ordered. Every trace of calm had vanished from his voice. The radar target continued its slow, fatal dive. Grant slammed his hand onto a red button on the console, connecting him directly to the domestic events network. I have a Nordo, no radio, aircraft descending without command over the Cascades, possible hypoxia event. We need a military intercept immediately. Over the Cascade Mountains, the weather was worsening quickly. A dense, localized blizzard rolled across the summits, hiding the jagged granite behind an impenetrable curtain of white. Beneath the cloud deck, following the valleys at 12,000 feet, 2 UH-60M Black Hawk helicopters from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment were returning from a classified mountain terrain training exercise. Their call signs were Dust-Off 1 and Dust-Off 2. Chief Warrant Officer Rhett Calder held the cyclic of his Black Hawk as his night vision goggles painted the world in an eerie synthetic green. Without warning, his radio crackled with a priority override from NORAD's Western Air Defense Sector. Dust-Off 1. This is Huntress on guard. We have a critical situation in your airspace. Commercial 737 Transwest 422 is unresponsive and descending rapidly. A fighter intercept from Portland is 20 minutes away, but the current track indicates the aircraft will strike terrain in less than 12 minutes. It is descending directly into your altitude block. Be advised, we have cross-referenced the passenger manifest with the Department of Defense database. There is an active duty Air Force pilot aboard, Captain Marin Whitaker, an F-35 pilot. She is seated in 7C. The cabin did not depressurize rapidly enough to deploy the oxygen masks automatically. The passengers are probably deeply asleep or succumbing to hypoxia. The pilots are down. A cold surge of adrenaline struck Rhett in the stomach. Huntress, dust-off 1. We have no ability to intercept a jetliner. Our maximum speed is 150 knots. Dust-off 1. We are not asking you to shoot it down. We need you to get eyes on it. It is passing through 15,000 feet and drifting directly into your flight path. Understood, Rhett replied, his thoughts racing. How do we wake her? Seattle Center is attempting to access the aircraft's cell-cal system and ring the cockpit, but that will do nothing if the pilots are unconscious. Dust off. Once you establish visual contact, we will route the airline's emergency dispatch frequency through your communication system. You need to reach the cabin interphone. Wake anyone who can hear you. Through the snow and darkness, Rhett's co-pilot suddenly pointed toward the right side of the canopy. There, 2 o'clock high. The Boeing 737 emerged from the cloud layer, enormous and horrifyingly silent. It appeared to be falling like a stone in slow motion, its landing lights dark, nothing more than a ghostly aluminum silhouette cutting through the snow-filled night. The jet was descending through 13,000 feet and rapidly entering breathable air, but it remained aimed directly at the merciless foothills of Mount Rainier. I have visual, Rhett shouted over the thunder of the Black Hawk's rotors as he banked hard to fly parallel with the descending giant. The difference in speed meant the airliner would race past them within seconds. Huntress, patch me into that cabin interphone right now. Inside the 737, the passenger cabin felt like a tomb. The air was thin, cold, and stale. Travelers lay slumped against windows and tray tables, imprisoned in hypoxic sleep that, for many of them, was dangerously close to becoming permanent. As the aircraft descended through 12,000 feet, the surrounding air contained more oxygen, but the increase was not happening quickly enough to revive a cabin full of deeply unconscious civilians. In the forward galley, flight attendant Tessa Monroe lay collapsed against the beverage cart. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven gasps. A blinding, agonizing pain pounded through her head, the first brutal effect of oxygen rushing back into a starved brain. Suddenly, a harsh, electronic ring pierced the galley's silence. Beep, beep. It came from the red wall-mounted interphone, carrying an emergency line from the ground. Tessa groaned as her eyelids trembled open. Nausea rolled through her, and her arms and legs felt as heavy as lead. The phone continued shrieking. Beep! With excruciating effort, she raised one hand. Her trembling fingers closed around the receiver, and she dragged it to her ear. Hello, she gasped. Instead of an airline dispatcher, a hard, clipped military voice exploded through the earpiece. Flight attendant, listen to me very carefully. This is Chief Calder, United States Army Aviation. Your aircraft is in a fatal descent. Both pilots are unconscious. You will crash in less than 9 minutes. Tessa's eyes flew open. The terror struck her oxygen-starved brain like a defibrillator. She looked through the small porthole window in the galley door. In the moonlight, the jagged peaks of the Cascade Range appeared terrifyingly close. They were flying low enough for her to see snow clinging to the pine trees. Oh my God, she choked. Oh my God, the masks didn't drop. Everyone is asleep. Do not panic. Follow my instructions exactly, Rhett commanded. There is an Air Force fighter pilot listed on your manifest. Her name is Whitaker. She is in seat 7C. Put down the phone, get to 7C, and wake her up now. Do it, or you will die." Tessa let go of the receiver. It hung from its coiled cord and swung violently when the 737 struck a pocket of severe mountain turbulence. The aircraft shook and groaned beneath the aerodynamic strain of its uncontrolled dive. She staggered into the aisle, clutching the overhead bins to keep herself upright. The cabin was nearly black, lit only by the pathway lights along the floor. The sleeping passengers swayed like rag dolls. "Row 7, she muttered, her breath turning to mist in the freezing air. "Row 7, 7C. Then she found it. The woman in the aisle seat had a gray hood over her head, large headphones covering her ears, and both arms folded tightly across her chest. Tessa lunged toward her, seized Maren by the shoulders, and shook her with the desperate strength of someone fighting for her life. "Wake up, please, you have to wake up." Maren Whitaker did not awaken gradually. Military conditioning had trained her to move from deep REM sleep to combat readiness in seconds. Her eyes snapped open, focused and alert. Her inner ear instantly detected the aircraft's subtle but terrifying attitude. The nose was down. The engines had spooled back. The cabin pressure felt completely wrong. She tore off her headphones. "What's happening?" she demanded, her voice cutting cleanly through the darkness. "The military," Tessa sobbed, pointing frantically toward the receiver swinging in the galley. "They called. The pilots have passed out. We're crashing. They said you're a pilot." Maren asked no questions. She released her seatbelt and vaulted into the aisle, her mind shifting at once into a cold, analytical state. She sprinted to the forward galley, caught the swaying receiver, and pressed it to her ear. "This is Captain Whitaker, United States Air Force. Who am I speaking with?" "Captain, this is Chief Calder, Vanguard 6, Army Aviation. I'm in a Black Hawk flying parallel to your descent. I'm currently 10 miles behind you and losing ground quickly. Your aircraft experienced a slow depressurization. Your flight is completely incapacitated. You are at 10,000 feet, descending at 1,500 feet per minute. You have approximately 6 minutes before impact with the eastern ridge of Mount Rainier." Maren fixed her eyes on the reinforced cockpit door. "Is the autopilot engaged?" "We believe VNAV disconnected because of pitot icing. The aircraft is trimmed nose down. Captain, you must get into that cockpit and pull the plane up." She stared at the thick Kevlar door. Security measures introduced after September 11th had made it strong enough to withstand small arms fire and the force of a breaching ram. It was electronically locked from the inside. "Chief," Maren said with frightening calm, "the door is locked. The crew is unconscious. Tell NORAD. Tell them I cannot get inside." Rhett's voice came back over the line, strained by grim finality. "You have to find a way. Break it down. Override it. I do not care how you do it. If you are not on that flight deck within the next 4 minutes, everyone aboard that aircraft will die." Maren dropped the phone and faced the reinforced door, the impenetrable barrier separating 150 sleeping people from a mountain of solid rock. She stood before the imposing Kevlar surface, her thoughts moving with the icy, hyper-focused clarity that had kept her alive in hostile airspace. The Boeing 737 was falling out of the night sky, entirely blind to the lethal wall of granite rushing toward it through the darkness. The aircraft convulsed, protesting the extreme aerodynamic forces created by the uncommanded descent. Its metal skin groaned under the strain. Maren turned her sharp gaze toward Tessa, who was clinging to the galley counter. The flight attendant's face was pale, coated in cold sweat, and filled with terror. "The emergency access keypad," Maren demanded, raising her voice above the growing roar of air outside the fuselage. "There is a digital keypad for emergency entry. What is the access code? Give it to me now." Tessa blinked slowly. Her oxygen-starved mind struggled to process the crisis unfolding around her. Hypoxia had severely impaired her thinking, and the sudden rush of adrenaline had overwhelmed her senses to the point of paralysis. "I can't," she stammered, her voice shaking uncontrollably. "It's company procedure. Only the purser, the captain." "The captain is unconscious and flying us into a mountain," Maren barked. She gripped Tessa by both shoulders and pulled her close, forcing the woman to meet her eyes. Maren summoned every ounce of her military command presence, radiating absolute authority. "Listen to me, Tessa. Look into my eyes. Breathe. You know the code. You learned it during recurrent training. Right now, it is the only thing keeping 150 innocent people alive. Tell me the numbers." Tessa pulled in a ragged, sudden breath. For an instant, the heavy fog inside her mind cleared. "3," she whispered, lifting a trembling hand toward the small numeric panel set into the bulkhead beside the reinforced door. 3790 pound. Maren reacted without hesitation. Her fingers struck the firm rubber keys in quick, deliberate succession. 3790 pound. The small LED above the keypad immediately changed from dormant red to blinking amber. A soft, high-pitched, rhythmic chime began sounding from the panel. Maren seized the heavy metal handle and pulled with all her strength. Nothing. The deadbolts remained firmly engaged. The Kevlar door did not move even a millimeter. "Why isn't it opening?" Maren shouted, as genuine fear finally pierced her disciplined composure. She shook the handle violently. "I entered the code." "There's a delay timer," Tessa cried, as she slid down the galley wall and landed on the freezing floor. It's part of the post-hijacking security protocol. When someone enters the emergency code, an alarm sounds in the cockpit. The pilots have 60 seconds to deny access if they believe there's a threat. If they're incapacitated and don't press the deny switch, the door unlocks automatically after a full minute. 60 seconds? Maren repeated, her blood turning cold. She looked through the small porthole in the galley door. Beyond the localized blizzard, the heavy cloud cover was beginning to separate. Below the aircraft, the frightening outline of the Cascade Mountains came sharply into view. Jagged pine trees burdened with snow rapidly took shape beneath the pale, brilliant moonlight. They were so close to the ground that the mountain ridges seemed impossibly immense. 60 seconds. Aboard an aircraft descending at more than 1,000 feet per minute was an eternity. It marked the difference between surviving a near disaster and striking solid granite at 500 miles per hour. "We don't have 60 seconds, Maren murmured. She planted her boots against the bulkhead as the 737 slammed into a powerful pocket of mountain turbulence. The plane abruptly dropped, and a sickening wave of weightlessness swept through the cabin. Behind them, the sudden, violent jolt finally began awakening the unconscious passengers. The higher oxygen concentration at the lower altitude, combined with the savage shaking of the aircraft, dragged them back from the edge of hypoxic sleep. A chorus of terror erupted beyond the curtain. Confusion quickly became raw, uncontrolled panic as people realized they were trapped inside a diving aircraft. Oxygen masks, which had finally deployed automatically during the descent, hung uselessly from the ceiling compartments and swung wildly like plastic pendulums. Children screamed. In the first row, a man hyperventilated as he clutched the armrests until his knuckles turned white. His eyes stretched wide with absolute horror. Marin shut out the chaos. She pressed one ear against the cold, immovable Kevlar door and strained to hear over the deafening slipstream and the passengers screaming behind her. Through the thick, bullet-resistant barrier came the muffled sound of a synthesized mechanical voice, the flight deck's ground proximity warning system. It delivered the most feared warning in commercial aviation with cold, automated finality. "Terrain, terrain, pull up. Come on," Marin whispered through clenched teeth, staring at the blinking amber indicator. "Come on, open the door. Terrain, terrain, pull up." She began counting backwards silently. 15 seconds. 14. 13. The plane pitched even farther forward, its nose dropping dangerously as the damaged autopilot system lost its final mechanical hold on the situation. The sound of the wind became unbearable, a piercing scream of air tearing across the aluminum fuselage. "Whoop, whoop, pull up, whoop, whoop, pull up." 3, 2, 1. A heavy, mechanical clack sounded as the electronic deadbolts retracted. The LED above the keypad changed from blinking amber to a steady, brilliant green. Marin grabbed the handle, threw all her weight backward, and tore the reinforced door open. The flight deck was a chaotic, blinding nightmare. Crimson master warning lights flashed everywhere. Klaxons blared, while the ground proximity system continued shouting its relentless commands. The avionics displays glowed with desperate urgency, casting harsh synthetic shadows through the cramped space. Captain Conrad Ellison and First Officer Julian Mercer were entirely unresponsive. Julian's upper body had collapsed over the control column. His dead weight was forcing the yoke forward, driving the airplane into an even steeper dive toward the earth. Conrad lay reclined in his seat, his head tilted loosely to one side. His unused oxygen mask hung beside his left shoulder. "Tessa, get in here now!" Marin roared over the alarms. "Get the first officer off the controls! Pull him back!" Tessa stumbled into the narrow cockpit, her hands trembling violently. She seized the unconscious first officer by the shoulders, braced her feet against the center pedestal, and dragged him backward with desperate, adrenaline-powered force. Julian's heavy body fell against the back of his seat, finally releasing the right-side control column. Marin did not waste time trying to move Captain Ellison gently. There was no time left. She grabbed the collar of his uniform shirt, planted her heavy boots against the rudder pedals, and hauled the older pilot out of the left seat. Conrad collapsed onto the cramped floor near the jump seat, unaware of the chaos surrounding him. Marin hurled herself into the captain's seat and closed both hands around the cold, molded plastic of the control yoke. Eyes, trained by thousands of hours in supersonic fighters, swept instantly across the primary flight display. Airspeed, 460 knots and climbing rapidly. Altitude, 3,200 feet above sea level. Vertical speed, descending at an agonizing 2,800 feet per minute. Beyond the cockpit windows, filling the entire windshield with imminent destruction, stood a vast, jagged wall of snow-covered granite. It was a secondary summit in the foothills of Mount Rainier, and the 737 was aimed directly at the center of the rock face. "Whoop, whoop, pull up, terrain ahead, pull up." Marin drove her right thumb into the small red autopilot disconnect button on the side of the yoke. A loud, continuous cavalry charge alarm erupted, announcing that the computer had surrendered all control to the human pilot. The Boeing 737 was entirely in her hands. Her right hand shot to the twin thrust levers. She forced them forward, pushed beyond the detent, and drove them hard against the firewall, demanding maximum takeoff, go-around power from the two enormous CFM56 turbofan engines suspended beneath the wings. "Spool up, damn it," Marin hissed through clenched teeth. "Jet engines do not respond instantly. They need long, agonizing seconds to wind up before delivering their tremendous power." She locked both hands around the yoke and pulled back with relentless force. At that extreme speed, tremendous aerodynamic pressure fought every inch of her movement, making the controls brutally heavy. Slowly and painfully, the heavy airliner's nose began to rise. The violent change in flight path produced immense G-forces that tore through the cabin. Passengers were driven deep into their seats, while the Boeing structure groaned under the punishing strain of the desperate maneuver. "Give me more," Marin grunted. Her muscles burned as she hauled back on the yoke. The radar altimeter began a horrifyingly fast countdown as the mountain ridge charged toward them. 1,000, 500, 400. The aircraft shook savagely. The control column began hammering in her hands as the stick shaker activated. Marin was pulling the nose upward so aggressively that the wings were on the absolute edge of an aerodynamic stall. One fraction more, and the aircraft would lose all lift and fall from the sky like a stone. She had to hold the airliner at the very boundary of its flight envelope, balanced on a razor-thin line between crashing into the mountain and stalling into open air. 300, 200, 100. Outside the cockpit, towering pine trees streaked past so close that Marin could distinguish individual branches weighed down by fresh snow. The airliner's belly scraped through the highest treetops. Branches exploded into fragments, and a violent shudder traveled through the entire aluminum fuselage. Then, miraculously, the solid wall of granite and trees disappeared from the windshield. In its place stretched the vast, empty, beautiful darkness of the open night sky. They had cleared the ridge by less than 80 feet. Marin maintained the pitch as the engines finally reached full, roaring thrust, driving the heavy aircraft safely upward into the clear, freezing air. High above, Chief Warrant Officer Rhett Calder banked sharply in his UH-60M Blackhawk and watched in stunned silence. He had prepared himself to see an unavoidable explosion against the mountainside. Instead, the enormous, ghost-like Boeing 737 suddenly reared upward like a silver leviathan, scraped violently over the crown of the ridge, and clawed its way back toward the heavens. Rhett keyed his radio. His voice trembled with pure relief. "Huntress, Dust-Off 1, you are not going to believe this. The Heavy is climbing. I repeat, the 737 is climbing. She actually did it." Inside Flight 422's cockpit, the frantic alarms finally stopped when the aircraft reached a safe altitude and established a positive rate of climb. Marin released a long, ragged breath. Her hands remained locked around the control yoke, her knuckles white. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. With one trembling hand, she reached for the pilot's heavy communication headset, lifted it from its hook, and placed it over her ears. Then she pressed the microphone switch on the yoke. "Seattle Center, this is Transwest 422, Marin said. Despite the horror of the previous 10 minutes, her voice was eerily calm and professional. "The captain is incapacitated. The first officer is incapacitated. I am an off-duty military pilot, currently in command of this aircraft. We have successfully cleared the terrain and are holding steady at 8,000 feet. Declare a full airborne emergency. I need an immediate vector to your longest available runway." For a moment, Stunned silence filled the frequency. Then the veteran controller replied, profound awe carrying through his voice. Trans-West 422, Seattle Center. We read you loud and clear, Captain. Turn right to heading 030. Welcome back to the sky. Let's bring you folks home. Did this unbelievable true story of Captain Marin Whitaker and Flight 422 leave you on the edge of your seat? The courage to act when only seconds separate life from death is truly extraordinary. If you enjoyed this dramatic aviation rescue, press the like button now. Please share this incredible video with your friends and subscribe to our channel for more heart-stopping, real-life survival stories. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload.